Thank you so much all for coming today. I'm going to give a really brief introduction so we try to keep the talk within our time limits. Khenpo Sodargye comes from really the largest Tibetan Buddhist monastery in the world, probably in the history of Tibet actually, at a place in northeastern Tibet called Larungar, which has, maybe he'll tell us how many monks and nuns there actually are, but people here, 15,000, 20,000. It's a really huge institution that's larger than most cities in the Tibetan Plateau. And one of the great accomplishments of Khenpo, who's really been one of the three leaders of the institution, has been from the very beginning of the founding of the monastery and his own religious career, he's been focused on outreach to the Chinese community, Chinese followers of Buddhism, people in various social sectors of China who are interested in Buddhism. And he's really emerged over the years as probably the most prominent voice amongst Tibetan Buddhist lamas in China for Chinese. He's produced a whole broad variety of publications in Chinese language that are widely read and broadly read, not only by Chinese, but also by a lot of the young generations of Tibetans who are avidly interested in hearing about Buddhism and new formats and new presentations. And so just recently he's been able to come to the US. He made two very brief visits before. And so we're very happy to have him here at the University of Virginia. And I thought what would be an interesting topic would be for him to share that wealth of experience over 30 years of working together with Chinese in relationship to contemplative practices, both Chinese who are passionately Buddhist as well as Chinese who are interested in the secular adaptation of these traditions in different walks of life. And for someone like myself, who obviously I grew up in the United States, but I spent a lot of my years of my life in China, it's often struck me that not only are America, the United States of America, and China the two most economically powerful countries in the world, but there's a lot of other things they share in terms of cultural traits. And although it may seem like those differences are much greater than the things that bind us together, when I first started spending a lot of time together with Chinese Buddhists who were interested in Tibetan Buddhism, they really reminded me very clearly of Americans who are interested in Tibetan Buddhism and who are followers of Tibetan Buddhist traditions. And so also in terms of our current interest at the University of Virginia and other universities in how to adapt practices from Buddhism and Hinduism, Christianity, and other things into secular settings such as education, healthcare, and entrepreneurship training, very similar things are also happening off in China. So with no further ado, I'm really happy today to welcome Khenpo Sodargye here at the University of Virginia, and he's going to be translated by Sangye Khandro and Lama Chunam. I'm very happy to have them here to lend their expertise to taking Khenpo's Tibetan and rendering it into English for our understanding. So please join me in welcoming Khenpo Sodargye.
Loptachi Mundane Tomer Dane Ta Gaten down Ta Loptra Loptro Chernabatsu Ta Yen Rung Varne Shichuk also Zanlanga Dane Rawanda Kaya the Jendana Tajin Jamim Dana Tan Dimo Rene Zerton for some shitty down. Happen the thing to what the back. Walk through the two times that then to doctrine down the division on the tapis sheet yet and tangible more on a detail. Then need get money in that garden cheese.
I'd like to begin my talk today by expressing my gratitude to all of you students here and teachers, especially David, who have been studying in this great institution, which is well known in our world as a source of freedom and democracy and justice, and especially directing your studies and attention towards the spiritual tradition and culture of Tibet, wishing to understand that, wishing to protect that, wishing to propagate that. And so for this I express my heartfelt gratitude.
Tatani da 가상한데 돈디 아니 tani thongmar ngso ndana wot gerni jimjik shen ga ya tani loma da ge kin mongbo la tani to tarka cha she ti kur kur da so tani tha ni bi kam nan dana yang to yana ta tani america sushi sa go tani jimjik ba da ta ramjin ba mboran ba timo yang kheba mongbo da nyam da tani 다 조랑 됐거나 다 한선 저가 저런 것도 같이 샤티 고르고 쇼소 tani 다 지금 길군콩 남비 거전 라더니 tani 롭자가 난거 지금 즉전이 난자가 너나고 르바가 tani 혼자 치모이 난자가 대소 단체다 tani 스탑 거다나 디론 할게 됐다니 전부 쇼 니타테 있나 지금 요 길군이 있나 다리 하장.
And secondly, I'd like to express my joy in having had an opportunity to meet many of the students yesterday who are learning Tibetan in order to graduate and obtain degrees, and the teacher who is teaching them, and to have had an opportunity to see the library of the Tibetan archives here in the university, and to answer some questions posed by those scholars who are studying about the differences between China and America and the similarities in terms of the way that education is carried forth. And so it made me really happy to see all that's going on here and to share with all of you, and so again I express my gratitude.
Gilgun Kongnan Bezena Tangi to Matsega Yamyon than Jedney. Tani Taji Yanap year the Wogan Nantang Tachulik, the so the Nepi Skurk, Tani Mostu Tibaz that it's Chetro. Tayana Shichuk, Tananang and the America Tondian Sotramon, the 가짜 쇼송도 tani 용시를 샤는 다 tani 지마양 다론도나 스탄포드 똑점모스가 인치민치민가 tani 당 야노가 당상 로마 모스가는 또 워크 춘도 정가 요긴도 임선 가리트 요너리 데다리가 tani 가짜 쇼스이 다네 그런 손저는 다 컨스타리앙 니문이 있나지 탑스르도 잠바즈다나 대전도는 지 다 장거 디스틴자 나소스 장 위시시 요지 말고 상 컨스타리앙 그 책임문이 벌랑 와있나 다 파칠 다 워크 추저양 저 갈라강선 샤나레 조더 tani na ngama daga lama yinjin noro chujin jingme kanzo konga yinna daga ta yayir de da chuchuk zo go song da na daga konga mara garna timo yong song ji ta garna timo yong song di ngsi da sangi chulu di wang de shen na ta lamin song da ha jiang ji gu ba dang dan ba dang de xia de zhen na yang ji ta yi qi yang yo ba ta timo zi ge de da sem song da na tani ta da ti ba de gam ni lo sim qi na wa tani xiao jian dang de mo tam chi de che zhe chong qi xi ge rong de di ta da de ge zun ren xin de yin ta zun ren xin de yin di ji ka san de ran yin na ji ya no ge da de sa shu su su na tani shi na wa san ji bi chu la dam gen de ha jiang nian le mang ge yo de gu si cha ber jiang ge tani ji wo ge na dan di ta da ji tani nyang ren xi ya da na lo zhong xi ne jing ji xi ne de zuo yang ha jiang mang ge yo de 디 나르기요 다 지금 로총 거는데 시험 바가 정도做있나 다 당상지 하장 그 제망선로 옆이 다 뒤쪽 디몬들서 트리오너리.
Now my own personal experience, of course, is based in China, and it is there where our Tibetan tradition abides and the teachers of these traditions. And so it's due to this that I was requested by different instructors and professors at colleges and universities in America to come and share my knowledge that I've gained from being a teacher in China, a teacher of Tibetan Buddhism, to Tibetans and also Chinese. So I've come to different universities in the past, and now I find myself here again. And this time, one of the subjects of interest, which is the topic for today's lecture, is how Tibetan Buddhism is being practiced in contemporary China, and how we particularly bring this tradition to the Chinese students, to those who are interested. And so, whatever the case may be, it's not really for myself something that involves many different methods or tools that we need in order to reach out to the Chinese people. And that I wanted to say that I was asked by my master, Khenpo Jigme Phuntsok, who's the founder of our monastic college, to teach to the Chinese people. And so he particularly empowered me to do this. And according to our tradition, when our master asks us to do something, we respect that and we try to accomplish that. And so that's why I have been working hard, really for the last 30 years, emphasizing how I can educate the Chinese people in the country where we live. And so, based on this, not just only because of my efforts, but today in China generally, the majority of the people are getting more and more interested in spiritual development, and especially in understanding the Tibetan Buddhist tradition. There's tremendous interest to learn how to practice and study this. And in that context, particularly the youth, there are many young people who are becoming more increasingly interested in studying about Tibetan Buddhism.
상기 출고 원도시니 나 더니 그때 열컴다나 머르기다나 열컴 다 디모를 쇼스 예와 지금 여기 온 말에 남배다리 루아르지 그 선신 스당 쓰인나 그거 다 추운도 흘고기다 추운도 냠슬라나 냠슬랭기 되네 지금 다리 찾긴다 라와요 빠져서 송는데 노르데 바로 책을 갔나요? 파이가다 너당 논쟁다 좀 더더 메일가는 루아근기 있다는 줄 담칠 같은 그 추단도 지기 측지디나나 전에 다 상급 정도는 되게 추송을 끝날 하흘라서다 가른다면다 나서도 세이도송 대나가서 오게 나한테 걸라만 그 추송을 끝날 뒤 측지도 돈이다 그거 냠버도 바탄전 더럭셔 시그제이다 그 세고를 그다 대 동주 연주 계남 백주 연거다리 추저 냠용는 명령의 시도 다 제기워도 그 지금 가른다면다 벌나 만드는잖아 이렇게 야시는 말에 되는데 사을 갖다 플러그 갖다 데리냐 다리가 아직 까먹었다 아까 다리야나 그 상막을 갖고 추셔야 되는데 그 스냥도 요나 그 상만 더셔시 되이다는데 딱 줄긴 거 라마탄 그 추송데 자 그 자담제바이 저런거다 다 직된 그 간나 셈치 스냥번도 봐요나 더셔도 있다는 추송을 그다 르스트를 뜻모서 차버려.
When it comes to the Buddhist tradition, from the Dharma perspective, there is equality, there are no distinctions or boundaries among people, among races, and so forth. And so the Buddha taught, as many of you most certainly know, that the Dharma is something that is meant for all living beings if they are interested to receive it. So the beings of the 6 classes. And it is a matter of being something that is equally possible for everyone according to their capacity. And so in lieu of that, there is one quote, or a shaloka, a 4-line verse from the speech of the Buddha, which is a kind of an aspiration. And it reads, "In the language of gods, nagas, yakshas, kumbharas, humans, and the like, whatever language exists in the world of living beings, may I teach the Dharma in all of those languages, so that those who wish to hear may partake of it." And so that's the end of the quote. And then, prior to giving a teaching, a teacher will recite this quote, and as they're on the final verse where it says, so that those who wish to hear may partake of it, they then will snap their finger. And you may have had the experience of hearing this and seeing this or not. Whatever the case, it indicates the equality of everyone. In my case, of course, I don't even speak English, and so speaking the language of the gods or the Nagas would be even more difficult than that. But the main point about the quote is that this is something that can be heard and is meant to be heard by everyone.
딱 보이잖아. 네 다리 좀 연단 좀 상해요. 그러나 버지니아 로트 좀 통미 되니 다 점바 보지나 그거 인더스탈 사춘 인자바보 로아미 로지가 다다 쉐집라나 메파죠 요비 다 되니 그저 치레제네 나 토마스 다 공급량아 치면은 되나 다시 제페션스라 그 공급은 뭔가 제조단 척송을 되나 다 아마 무스던 쓰이나 다리가 그래서 무스던 쓰이나라 되네 지금 잠님이 받아나 되네 라스티아 받아인바 또 대전도 무 쓰이나라는 기니 넘어네 되네 데스티다는 그 라왕거 되네 왕차 그거 손을 지니 나 뒤다 왕차 요가 공부 똑송가 다 뒤동 나와진 그 맞수 그거 로아스당 쓰이나 단비 추고 그거 런거 있다 멤버십 장지나 뒤 다리 왕차도 맞수 나 추고 돌다 되나 대라 지금 차브라메 파타 디모즈도 다리 송요데
Now, the founder of this great institution and one of the most important founding fathers of the United States, of course, as you know, Thomas Jefferson, he saw humanity to be equal as a birthright. And based on that premise, that humanity then inherently deserved freedom and inherently deserved happiness. And so whoever is born in this world has this birthright. And this view is the same view that Dharma represents and is propagating. And that is that whoever the living being is, they have the capacity to be able to understand the path that leads to true everlasting well-being and happiness. They have this birthright. They are born equal in terms of this, and they deserve the freedom and the dignity to pursue their goals.
할레직 그 야침부 영용아 아니 추추샤티나 자가 이겨쉐티나 자가 나라만 지금 변도 주고디 그 콘도 그 가지리양 너무 다르시니 되네 다리 콘을 장 싹 살나요 다른 다리 년을 전도는 다가는 걸다나 추추 참에 년을 전도 로추 다리 차디메 봐요 되네 추초 소나요 저 다리 추추시는 막 동네 샤라 잠방아 다리 좀 모바 침부메 다 런거 뜻다고 단 소하고 지름 초드네 체리제네나 다 상로 다나 쪼도 추고 자나 판바 주고디 세인데 판바 주는다 세시마야 판바 주는 아니고 근데 추고 자나 판바 주고디 지금 장돈 그 데스켓 좀 답게다 근데 장돈 거 근데 로알라 데스켓 좀 받아나 등을 타봐 단디 그 상기 바가 추르 그 그냥돈 타르트 받을 때리
Now, as for myself, honestly speaking, I began propagating Dharma in China some 30 years ago. And for quite a long time, I went through many difficulties and obstacles to overcome. That was in terms of giving spiritual teachings and translating teachings from Tibetan into Chinese. And not only during the life of my master, Khenpo Jigme Phuntsok, but after he passed away, I continued and have continued to do so, giving continuous classes and attempting to maintain the continuity. While he was alive, I served as his personal translator, and then I've continued to propagate his teachings from that time onward to the present day. Because according to the Buddhist philosophy, what matters most is this and the future lifetime. And so when we think of this and future lifetimes, we have to think about benefiting oneself, bringing oneself well-being and happiness, but most certainly also doing this for the benefit of others, working for the welfare of others to bring them well-being and happiness and to free them from misery and suffering. And that is the essence of Buddha's teaching. Now, initially, we began teaching to the Chinese people when there was freedom to speak about spiritual subjects and so forth in the 1980s. And at that time, what we encountered more specifically when I mentioned hardships or obstacles was that there were two principal original traditions, old traditions of ancient China that were still present, although having diminished over the centuries of time. The traces of those traditions were still embedded in the minds of the people. And those traditions are Taoism, founded by Lao Tzu, and Confucianism, founded by Confucius, which both of which more or less emerged consecutively around the same time as Buddhism, some 2,500 years ago. And so both of those lineages have continued into modern times in China. And the situation was that there was this rigidity, or this lack of openness to receiving the spiritual teachings from the Buddhist tradition because of being so self-absorbed in the views, in the terms of both of them, that they adhered to, their own philosophies. And so we found it very difficult to actually begin by teaching Buddhism openly to the people because they had these predisposed ideas.
그거 다 출리적인 느낌도 지금 당상 처제 건로 다 나가마 냐듯지다나 다 유럽 그 사자가다나 냐듯적인 느낌도 지금 사 부모들 조금이다 옛날에 뒤에 그나 뭐뭐 보스 그 냐듯다가지다나 뭐 탐식 그 라파다 이거 다 zuiurke sim zuiurke deni non shi soan yurke ta timon zu samba mafto zemana chun de ji yang da bin soa da ra de chi kun soa zu zhen ju de la par chiwa gen de si me ba da ren zhong de.
And so the original knowledge, however, that was derived from these two traditions had declined over a period of time. And we found this kind of circumstance, and we also found that most of the people were not really even believing in a spiritual doctrine that would bring them a better life in the future or a better life as a human being. That in fact they had no faith in anything. They were just simply atheists and believed in nothing. And so it's very difficult to begin to inspire them to be interested in the Buddha Dharma or anything in a spiritual direction for that matter. And so what that means is, and even those who were adherents of the Confucianism and the Taoism, they certainly didn't believe in a future lifetime. They only believed in this lifetime. At the same time, they were lacking the methods to accurately refute the possibility of the past lifetimes, but they're still establishing only this lifetime. And so if you have a spiritual belief, you have to have some way to back it up. But this was simply kind of non-existent. And we also found that their brains were very dull, many of them, because of having used drugs such as opium for extended periods of time, and that was actually in the DNA of the people.
디 오네츠 체응합식 그러면은 사리당 가라를 삼는다나 대진도는 다지 나츠다리 추운도 지금 뭐 담치다 그 소알압 가도를 삼나 근데 또 담치다 니 있나다리 디 그런 수 삼바다 때문에 나는 다 요마를 켈는 말에서 뭐 제가 매 그 추상로도 다리가 다른 샤파통 거스 가레게제나 다냐라 તને તારી ઝેન્યાન મારે ન્યારવા ઝેન્દ કે તિમો ઝેગદાને નતો ખેલે મારે તો તિમો ઝેમાયો મને કોમા ગોચોરણ કંગારી તઝેરે다 딱 니트제요 냐라 요네 냐라 요나 예딱 요네 때 요네 인디 때 다리 ઝેન્યાન મારે ઝે죠 મારે 또 다리 롱다를 박을 보고 그런 소 김선 다리 접고 가레게제나 오다 추도 산르당 가르바레네 또 ઝે마요 મને 산르 그 오늘 쭈요는지 또 너치가 오늘 쭈요는 말해 제고 근데 또 번나던 거 근데 개바모 송아 잠들이 결혼한데 근데 다리 살을 때랑 가끔은 근데 선생 다그 체응합실 다리 다 체도 코나 있나 총너리 체응하마 요메 고건 말이지 그러나 공적을 쳐져온잖아 체인도 먹고는 그 체심마다 갈아보죠 체인도 먹고는 그 체심마 갈아보죠 띠띠치다 때는 결혼 다 다리가 루를 그 모즈그네나 다 체심마에서 만들면 켈레는 말이지 그 런나다 마노나다 맞수 응요 네츠가 장든도 상기비 좀 타거나 치트를 송아진다 대다리가 셔터고 운동 막도 되는 대신 마도지 장세나 그런 걸 앞던 거 다니나 다 다리 지금 돈도 이거 말했습니다 도미 다 추세요 가속돼요 소송을.
And so as I mentioned, they were believing only in this life's phenomena, and yet they had no method to accurately refute the possibility of past or future lifetimes. They're just only establishing this lifetime. So it was actually illogical. And in Dharma teachings, whatever we say, whenever we represent Buddha's speech, it's always perfectly logical, and it cannot be refuted. And so there were some who said, well, when we teach them, you shouldn't say that there's a hell, because they won't believe this, and this will worsen their condition of disbelief. And I said, no, we have to say that there's a hell. We have to say that there is a spirit realm. We cannot say that there is not, because this can be logically established through our own system of logical reasoning. And we should believe in the speech of the Buddha and the great scholars of the past who have never spoken anything that can be defeated, have never spoken anything that was contradictory. And others would argue and say, well, still, because they only believe in this lifetime, if they can't even know the truth about this lifetime, they're certainly not going to understand about the future lifetime. So just leave it. Don't even go there. And I said, no, we can't just leave it and not go there, because we have to tell them what is the truth, whether they're ready to believe it or not. And this can be explained to them through logic and positive reasoning. And if it's something that the Buddha taught, it is something that we must express and give to them. We shouldn't try to cover it up or water it down.
tene dogme to bista ta chaga zu zango garte te sombo do zu ya haz tarpir modo ge janzi na ta na chu go ton charta janzo tene ta marik sudan se na ra paru ya haz do koalem ta ko yon mare ta te indi benna tari go ta ngasong tari ne sam zer ko na daga roa rchik zer ko na da ndo zu ke malen ba tham chada rankar kan jong jog ge janzi na khasum khorale ta tar go na 항상 거리 등을 탈에다나 탈와 공항 토고지 장세나 다 탁친 그 추막도 탁만 그 다리 추 제거나 야랑 그추 잠스 그 공항야 아니 토탑다 추를 간나 셔요 말에 때 옛날에는 춤 산에 봐서도 그거 단 접토 요 말에 다 때였나 다리 지금 통미 람그 고제거나 마제 딱 인종도 또 개발해 봐라 더니 지금 거리 장전도 또 이양 딱 봐서도 시진도
Hence, in making a decision to teach them authentic Dharma, then this is not a discussion of worldly understanding or worldly development, the development of positive worldly qualities. That would be a different explanation. But that spiritually, according to Buddhist teachings, the root teachings involve contemplation upon renunciation, the cultivation of the bodhicitta, the awakened mind, and the realization of selflessness. And so that would be the selflessness of the person, the selflessness of phenomena. And whoever is going to study Buddha Dharma and accomplish the goal of this path must simply come to know these three aspects and to internalize and realize. And so this begins by believing that there are the three realms of existence and that one needs to be liberated from the three realms of existence. And if one does not understand this, then one is not going to understand the notion of renunciation, of wanting to renounce attachment to cyclic existence. So if one doesn't believe in that, then it's incomplete, and there's no basis for moving on from the lower vehicle into the higher vehicle of Mahayana, which then leads one to realization. And so this is the cornerstone of the entire path of practice, and that's why we had to begin at that point.
추는 거 다 망제 그 추, 벌나 다른 줄이니까 세mer다 레짐지 쿠리님 너도 담치다 저 상마가 더니 고아양도 렌지다 더니 찾던 것들이 우금겨야 니 다다 좀큰 하자 뭐 요기요.
And these days, as a result of that, many of the teachers in the most important universities in China, they are extremely learned. These scholars are extremely learned concerning the four thoughts of basic doctrine of Buddhism, the four thoughts that turn the mind to the spiritual path, contemplating the rarity of the precious human rebirth, how difficult it is to obtain, contemplating the truth of impermanence, contemplating the truth or the infallible truth of the law of cause and result, and the faults of the suffering of samsara. And so this is something that is openly not only understood but being described in different educational systems in China. Now, in terms of the Confucianism system, according to their view, they only believe to develop compassion or loving, kind thoughts towards human beings, but that this attitude is not directed towards other living creatures, such as animals and insects. And therefore, that is something quite different from the contemporary Mahayanist Chinese masters, who draw from that renaissance of compassion or altruism that was revived by one emperor who lived about 1,500 years before, Emperor Liang Wu Dai. And he instigated the revival of the existing precepts for the lay community and also the monastics, which included becoming a vegetarianism. And this was based on compassion for sentient beings, not just only humans, but for all living creatures. And so it became that, as you know today, most Chinese Buddhists, they will be emphasizing compassion. They will abstain from meat eating and killing. This is more or less the direction that most people will adhere to, and so it's not just only limited to human beings. However, because there's still the continuation of the Confucianism view that goes into that, there are still many who only would direct this compassionate attitude towards humans and not necessarily the animals. And so therefore, the original compassion that was revived by this emperor has declined in present-day times. The doctrine of Mahayana Buddhism, or the greater vehicle, is not just only emphasizing compassion for human beings, but also emphasizing compassion which is expressed towards all living beings equally. And the reason is because there's not a single living creature that doesn't wish for happiness. And there's not a single living creature that wants to suffer, right? And so, therefore, sentient beings in their delusion and in their confusion, although they wish for happiness and do not want to suffer, they contradict their wish by their actions, not knowing how to produce the causes for happiness or eliminate the causes for suffering. As the great Pandit Shantideva reminded us in the quote that Khenpo gave, which means precisely that, all living beings wish for happiness, but they lose the capacity to accomplish and establish this because they're overpowered by their own confusion or delusion. And so in Buddhist teachings, particularly here Mahayana Buddhism, then we are not directing compassion towards only human beings. There are some who have said to me, well, you can't teach that this should be directed towards other creatures such as animals and insects because that will contradict their cultural views. And I said, what do you mean? I can't change the teachings to meet the needs of their ancient cultural philosophies. I can only teach the pure doctrine of Mahayana Buddhism. I'm not going to adjust that to meet the needs of the ancient philosophy. And so whatever the Dharma tells us, whatever the Buddha taught in terms of Mahayana doctrine, it is that all beings are equal and should be treated equally in regards to this. That's why these days in China there are many who have faith and devotion, who are cultivating the bodhicitta. It's difficult to say that they have cultivated it, but are working on that and are seeing all living beings in an equal way and taking the vow to continue that kind of training and practice it in a practical way, such as the application of the 6 paramitas. And other philosophies that we find prevalent in China in modern times include the Zen tradition, which is derived from Chen Buddhism. It can also interchangeably be called Chen Buddhism or Zen. And there is not necessarily the inclination to put effort towards the accumulation of merit or the purification of obscurations, but to just go directly to the highest view and to sustain that view in meditation. There are many who are teaching this. There are many who are practicing this. Also, there are many who are practicing the Pure Land sect of Buddhism, whereby they pray to Buddha Amitabha to grant them refuge and protection with devotion, the Pure Land sect. And then there are many who are practicing what's referred to as humanistic Buddhism. And that would be more of a modern day approach whereby they want to improve this life. And that means to increase their life, their longevity. They want to increase their prosperity and abundance and make everything more fortunate and auspicious. Are they interested in what happens after this life or what may have happened before this life? Well, no. So that means they're not interested in attaining a state of awakening that transcends worldliness. They are focused on this life's phenomena alone. And so those are the humanistic Buddhists, and there are many of them in China. And so they would fall into the category of what Buddhists refer to as practitioners on the vehicle of gods and humans. And if that's the case, there is no liberation from samsara. And so the main point of the Tibetan Buddhist teaching is to study, to contemplate, and to meditate. These three are the root premise through which one is able to understand Buddha Dharma in an effective way, to hear or listen, to contemplate the meaning, reach your own conclusion in terms of the view, and then meditate upon that, at which time you're able to sever the root, which is the cause for suffering in samsara, fixation upon the self, by realizing through prajna or incisive knowledge the selflessness of the ego or the person. And so once one is free from the self, there is the ability to awaken in a state of omniscience. And so that has been the way that Dharma has been taught from the beginning until now, and that is how we teach it in China.
ngama lo ni shi ngana tane america yong yong re ta ten di tane chuba ji yang ta bang gari ya ka de dang sang yang chuba yang ta ba re re ta no ji lo chung ge reng de so yin na mo ma yin na lo ni shi ge rang a de no na sa ji bi chu nyam se len ba da jim ji gen ba yin di de la ji ram ji ji na sa ji bi jong mo zu de ma lak chang wa ge go ko na do shu ge na jong ka po nga ndora ngom ba chat ma 대전도는 지금 다 원마다 세션等种个不啊다 응어가 다리가 양人把人的就3年拉说把梦做着다 대조양 추바 탐치 그 뭐만이나 로종시 결근때 근데 지금 고아르나 양 축성을 들었다 얘나야 니 다처즈가 다 당선 그러나 야납 나있나 야납가 파치와다 근데 월견 나왔던다 뭘 야치 있는 거 좀 겁지 그래 근데 납쇼 프로젝트 소연이나 뭘 죽치와니 다리 했더니 겁진데 옛나요 말럭 창와 깃바다 창와가 투스미 하시는 네 되나 납쇼 나지 공세세로 곱산요 말랑라 때다리 나토요.
So, given that this is the way through which one develops on the path of Buddha Dharma traditionally, that is to say, to study, to contemplate, and to meditate, these three trainings in wisdom knowledge must be must never be separated. So they are always to be kept together. And if so, then the aspirant will be able to accomplish the status of being an authentic Dharma practitioner. Otherwise, it's difficult to say. And I bring up this point because I first came to America some 20 years ago, and at that time I did notice that there were a few authentic Dharma practitioners, or so it seemed. And now, in subsequent years when I've come, I've noticed that there seem to be some authentic practitioners. But when we really look at what constitutes becoming an authentic practitioner according to our tradition, when I say study, it means the study of the 5 categories of study according to Sutra, a thorough study of the Vinaya, of the Pramana, which is logic or reasoning, of the Abhidharma, of the Madhyamaka, and of the Paramitas. And that is followed by the tantric studies of the Guhyagarbha Tantra and other classifications in the highest yogas of the Upadesha class. And so, therefore, when you think about this and about how one must rely upon qualified teachers in order to accomplish these different stages of study, although it seems that Dharma took root in the West in the 1960s and has been propagated since then, and it more or less was revived in China in the 1980s, it seems that it is actually spreading and increasing more in China in an authentic way than it is in the West. Now, I'm not saying this because someone else said it and I'm repeating their idea. And when I speak from my own understanding of what is true and correct that I've observed. And hopefully it is, in fact, the true condition that I'm presenting. And so, for example, at our monastic college in Tibet, we have, from the time that it began until now, continued to teach Dharma according to these 5 categories of study of Sutra that I just mentioned. And then that is followed by the subsequent studies in mantra. And as a result of that, over the years, there are many Chinese students who have become monastics, monks and nuns, and also lay people who have gone through this curriculum and accomplished it. Many of them becoming Khenpos and Khenmos. That means scholars, Fulbright scholars, male and female, who have achieved these accomplishments, and they are capable, fully qualified to teach, just like their Tibetan lamas taught them. And so, if you really look closely at what has been accomplished by the Chinese people due to the efforts of this process that we've presented for them, then their knowledge that they are gaining and that which is being produced is not only of highest value but is extremely profound. This is quite unlike reading a few Dharma books and then claiming to know about Buddha Dharma, translating a few books and claiming to be a translator of Buddha Dharma, or just analyzing some of the topics in a class and then considering oneself to be learned on the subject. And then Ken Rinpoche gave a quote from the Sutra Palpoche, which speaks about this subject. And so we have to think carefully about how important it is in the Buddhist tradition, just as it is with any study or attempt to learn, that this needs to be approached gradually and systematically so that one can actually really have a strong foundation in training and knowledge to accomplish the goal.
Bopa tamchada chu chirtar shani ya tamchada chu chirtar shani to songlu ta shirna bopa zikita chu tapa yaha yana chongchong de tapa yaha yana inna ya rapto shong gare ma to chama ige machine ta mo yonde ta jana ko so inna chu chongchong inde ne ige simkhun mo yonde retan ni ngone inna ta molo samche ga ranga tariga tene woda ya so nim종다 샹칩 셈 다음에 갔다 근데 속소 이다나 그 샤지 어떠긴 더니 자나 것다리가 뭐 탐치겠나 양소 어떠긴 다 뭐뭐 가라 더니 잠발라가 다리 왕 끌고 더니 체랑 찍게 다리 왕 끌고 그래 땡이 왕 그람 시다 그라 그럼요 체랑 찍게 왕 그럼요 지요 찍게 왕 그럼요 다때 이거 챈디 동아 제가 톱나요 다못 톱나요 당다나更大样呢这个我这个吃不么这个让上网当过的对经验啥子跟通个没对呢那这个大人个这个娘娘他个个下呢他拍吃的么子嘞
There are teachers on this tour, educators, who have asked me, how is it that you would teach differently to the Chinese versus the Tibetans? What might that difference be? Well, I would have to say that these days in modern, the Tibetans in China, at the present time, still do have faith in Dharma inherently. But except for those who become monastics and go off to the institutions to learn, many of the young people remain illiterate, unfortunately. So those things have to be taken into consideration. It's not necessarily the case that the Tibetan culture is increasing their knowledge and education spiritually among the lay people, but more or less in the monastic institutions. Whereas among Chinese, all of the people are literate and willing to want to learn if that is their tendency. And so in my 30-year experience, I have to say that the basic principles of the Buddhist path are what I have emphasized and taught to both cultures. And so that would be renunciation, cultivating bodhicitta, the reasons why this is necessary, as I've described briefly here today, and mainly emphasizing how to realize the identitylessness of self. And so with these as the main curriculum for how we teach, then people are able to develop a qualified education and proceed from there in both cases. Many of the Chinese people do continue to request for Zambala empowerments. That means to be empowered to gain wealth, or longevity empowerments so that they can live longer and have a better life. I've never given any of those empowerments. I never intend to. I see no value in it whatsoever. Trying to give someone an opportunity so that they can gain more wealth or live longer in this world so that they can have a happier samsaric life, that's not my goal. I don't spend time doing that because I don't see any positive fruition that would be a valuable way to spend my time or theirs. And so rather than that, I choose authentic, traditional ways of teaching that will benefit them in the long term, rather than emphasizing something that has no essence.
shirtung nge samlo tangna huina tangsang janak tani chupa mambo sik nimjong da shanchip ke sim dangme ke tawala hajang dornang shi da tusum gumsun shi ya te dang da jang ge tani nashuk ma tamche ke yang na te dari kwa lengi yojire sam ge nge saru jilon ya ma ta nge chire zene na ta america la sok ba nashuk huina dari Hollywood korku dari holonye inna jaga to mayen ba holoyan inna jaga jada mon jawa chama dona teni nga chu kharshuk nagjun chama ga teni nyamsel nang eta na sambak chingir ro ta ka te masar gyanak mo thamchup sambak chingir maspa nga chu woyer ko lo chung thamchup bo gane na teni dari sambak chingir song ta nga chu woyer ko lo chung mombo ko sambak teni amr ko lo chung ko sambak ko song chari gane ta te na wo ko dari ga gambo tamchik chunde yana tene nashok tariga sambak chingder sonaran tene jimsang ko yana tarchik tariga the skur banta kyasni mar sang.
And generally among Chinese there are many disciples and practitioners who have cultivated genuine renunciation and genuine bodhicitta, compassion. This is something that's really occurring. And although I have limited experience with it, I'm quite sure that that's actually occurring here in the West as well. And from my way of thinking, I was thinking that because the Eastern world likes to imitate many aspects of the Western world, such as the music industry and Hollywood and movie making and so on and so forth, that it's entirely possible that what is happening is the Western world also likes to imitate aspects of the Eastern world that they can begin to accomplish in their environment, such as the example of the older established Tibetan masters who inspire them.
Shanchip ke sem marshit zemana America to so rang nyang top tarin chombi yakar zinare to shanchip ke sem shabjadi to chuchut laman jona mareze yena yang e dari shanchip ke sem gor ko to jemson mo shok so ne khani khorso.
There are some who have said when you come to America you shouldn't speak about cultivating the bodhicitta, the awakened mind, because this is a country that's based on the premise of achieving personal freedom, and people won't be able to understand that. But whatever the case, it just came out of my mouth, out of my control. If I have upset you, please forgive me, but this is what I really wanted to say. And in conclusion, I have 3 hopes to leave with you.
다 레와 상보도 치르잖아. 킬 넘버 다른더니 지금 로아미 다리 시 장전당 내를 내지 양판 단 니무 쇼스더니 달로 니기야야면서 저거는 존len 용너래 아마르기 로지 원도시나 너 지금 로지 연롱을 껴서 말했다. 싸우는 원도시나 가서 되는 잠보는 거 떠나 하장 차 돈보면 요니 tene ji ma zo dan de rang wang ge jia ge ha chang cha chu jian ge song de de ne na ji da rong yang zun za mo leng ge tene song long de zo tene ji meng ten ne da ji da pe yong a da cha zhe yong a ge che de zun len xi jie ngo zu wo ba ge hui zi ge zang se ta ge ma se ta ge ji ge yo men na da li zeng ge tang a yan zi ji mo da hui zo de da de zun da jian ge ne teni hungul loji chasta jenda taronyo teni montene ta jene ta sonlo rantang jende so the tapper ta chongkyu ke che to zumba chi jo go rela tang te.
My first hope for all of you is given that the world looks up to the United States and that this particular institution has preserved and promoted the values of the founding fathers for the last 200 years, which in the broader perspective of things is not very long, but according to what's been happening here on this continent, it is a long time, and it has been a very potent time, such that the entire world looks up to and wants to imitate what has happened here. And so because of the importance of this, these values are something that all people cherish and want to be able to connect with. So those of you who are students and educators here, you simply must continue to improve the process of education which is inspired by these same values. And that means the process of preserving, protecting, and propagating these great values, which have been able to be so effective in a relatively short period of time. And this is like one example that we have in our Tibetan tradition. If someone has owned an excellent golden chain, then that golden chain should not be replaced by a chain made of ordinary metal, right? And so likewise, once you have possessed such an excellent golden chain as the legacy of this institution, then the very same quality of excellence must be sustained for future generations.
Noa sanjibi zhungur kamna gyaro la dan bazi hachang chigo ndo chachenzi wonde dina na chije wonde jena de digi hindi gyarbu njoger na longshun za da nishi ta jimon da longshun za da nishi jimon da gyaro to na kanjo kando ji lena chma jinder jisun sonde cheze jena gyaro chimbo yinara na shirambi ne kana nierang za chang de jinder na gyolong shu chang jisun jang ma rang sem tang na tari gang devi le tan digbi le da so jisun tan ro na re ze chen nan be de ye chen nan da me chen nan da ding ni nyang na ga re ba ye.
My second hope, whether you are able to believe this way or not, still it's my hope for you, so I'll present it, and that is that all of you, educators and students alike, will be more mindful, or as mindful as you possibly can, of the truth of the law of karma, or cause and result, cause and effect. Because at the time of our death, we should find ourselves in a place where we don't have trepidation, where we don't have remorse, and we feel satisfied that we've been able to accomplish our goal in life and leave behind something valuable, so that we're not going to be facing suffering when we go on to the next experience that will follow. In regards to that, there's a quote from the Raja Vavadaka Sutra, which is advice to the king, Galpola Dampe Do, which says, when the time for death comes, Buddha told the king, your wealth, abundance, status, and retinue will no longer follow after you. Alone you will go, accompanied only by the shadow of your karma. So whoever you are, in regards to this truth, we're all absolutely equal. This notion of equality. Buddha was telling this to the great king because he's the king, and that he too must leave behind everything that is powerful and valuable, and take with him what? Whatever karma has been accumulated in the mind, whether it's virtuous or non-virtuous. And so think about these things and try to adopt them into your view if you can, if you would like to.
만 체반도 전에 점직 점직 소를 전에 점직 쉐네 나야 까까서 점직 쉐노다 랑가 다 냠는다 갸갸 럭터 냠용다 갸긴도 하장까 챈데 뭐수 추가 나라나 추도 랑 정식다나 대전도나 로종 코나스 그래요 말 랑가 냠는다 갸기다 냠는다 갸긴도 어느 지금 다지 쉬를 공부 코나스 상노 땅다는 그래냐 말 난 생각하면 그거네. 난 생각 때니까 마토나 다 직등근 아주 신소가 시지 야친 버전나 ran 시위네 나 하자까 뭐래. 네 아마 아인슈타인다는 뉴턴 그쪽은 남타라다니요. 근데 그것은 단 철안디는 그렇게 소술기고 담을 만들더라. 무슨 잠을 시지 정도 참에 콘서트 따지다. 다 때나 뭐 수제 쫓다나 치레나 난 생각 그러나 실은 무고라 점치양 도거다 조어런 거 샘데라 가잔들 샘거 뭐다 샘거 랑전 샘거 당대 점직 시기 하장 같이하래 뭐마 야거 그 괴바 첨보 하장 잠보랑 시지장거等也是进步一万还是几个人，空个吃双之间，身体上的马戏呢，对都等会帮助讲，对的他们是见了的，当初身的习惯这嘛都这么，身的马戏呢，他可能做就可以把哈家人在那这个样，他人民人个等会儿，但是哈人多个难这个，对啊，真个难这个，但你们穷真的这个送的样子，对呢，那把说的人际学习的样。让刚才有打人个身的检查人，等你能身了过去呢，那可把他们这个言论人日日算的一切有，他妈了这些的了。
So my third hope for all of you is that because you are studying and you are working hard to improve and increase your knowledge, I would like to encourage all of you to focus upon mental development and bring your knowledge into your mind, into the core of your mind. So to not only externalize your education, but to introspect and internalize. Turn this into your mind and your own personal experience. If you're learning something valuable, become that which is valuable yourself, is the basic point. So that, again, at the time of your death, you won't face difficulties. I had the opportunity to read the life stories of Newton and Einstein, and it was interesting to note that later in their life, these great scientists also developed autism and suffered as well as ordinary individuals. And so we are ordinary individuals, but we have this capacity to become something extraordinary. And it depends on how we internalize what we learn and what we do with that. So it seems to me very, very important to take it to another level. And that you do that by coming to know that this depends on how you master your mind and how you realize your own mind's capacity. So focus into your own mind and heart. And on that note, I'd give you a quote from one of the greatest Indian saints and masters of all time, Shantideva, who wrote in his Way of Life of the Bodhisattvas, the Bodhicharya Avatara, if the core of mind is unknown, although wishing for well-being and release from misery, such results will not occur. And so it is. That sums it up right there. So I wish all of you true happiness and release from suffering, and I know that it will come through mental development and inner experience, and that it's up to you. So I hope that you will do that. Thank you.
Thank you.